I have a group of friends I went to college with, and every year we get together and sort of talk about what's happened to our lives in the preceding year. Last year when I visited them, every single one of them was talking about Vietnam. And all of them were intensely curious. They were all talking about the fact that we knew nothing about this country. For 25 years, it's been sort of cloaked in mystery. So I ran into the Vietnamese ambassador, and we started talking about combining the group of photographers, a really fascinating country, and seeing if we could put together something that would give people around the world the feeling that they'd actually visited Vietnam for the first time. The men and women that work on our books serve as the world's eyes. They represent Time and Life and Newsweek and National Geographic and the London Sunday Times.
Here we go, here we go, here we go.
They come from 23 nationalities. So this is not a tourist look at Vietnam. It's a combination of the outside world and Vietnam itself, because we have 15 Vietnamese photographers teaming up to try to do this intensive one-week look. The Day in the Life books and now the Passage 2 projects are sort of the annual gathering of the tribe. There are about 200 men and women in the world who call themselves photojournalists. They're all nationalities, all ages, all backgrounds. And the one thing they share is sort of a childlike curiosity about the world. The day that President Clinton lowered the embargo, I had two completely contradictory emotions. The first was thank you, because our sponsorship had been going quite slowly until that point. And my second emotion is that the fragility of this place, there's an innocence here. I feel very privileged to be here now. I think that all of our photographers feel they're seeing a Vietnam which is not going to be this Vietnam very much longer.
It's my very first time to Vietnam, and I'm really, I was excited when I found out I was going to the north. I had an interesting experience in Hanoi because I had the chance to see it through the experience of the youth, of adolescence. I tried to come up with some of the different ideas of what would adolescents do, you know, and the barbershop, the hair, how you look, style, trends. It's important, at least in America, and I wanted to see if the same thing was happening here, which it was. I noticed they shaved the whole face, which was sort of interesting for me. I'm curious about that age because that's an age when you try to, usually in America anyway, kids try to break away from their families in a way and get their own independence. I hear that here the kids are with their parents longer, but I'm finding that there is a lot more independence and style than I expected. At the high school, I met the beauty queen of the school, where my guide told me she's quite famous here in Hanoi. So luckily she was nice enough to let me come home with her, and she went to the beauty parlor. She does that 3 times a week. She had her hair shampooed, and she let me photograph the whole thing, and then her family invited me to stay and watch them have dinner. She has a big family. I guess that's traditional here in Vietnam, where the family stays close together and even children live with their parents even after they get married.
The people want to be close all the time. They don't want to be separate. 3 generations live in one house. The grandparents, the parent, and the kid. They want to close together. That's normally in Vietnam. That is our Vietnamese traditional custom. Everything happens outside the house because, as you have seen, the Hanoi housing problem is a very big problem. And now we run into the economic orientation. So everybody wants to occupy the front house to open a service like a shopping, restaurants, And that is why Hanoi become like a big market with traffic very terrible.
I don't think I've ever been in a place that has more incredible street life. I think what is different about Vietnam than any country I've ever worked in is that everything takes place on the street. When you walk down the street at night, the family living rooms are on the street. Watching families on bicycles, 3 or 4 members of one family on one bicycle. You have a sense that this is the way the human race used to be a long time ago, before we all got little compartmentalized, air-conditioned cubicles that we live in the West.
I've been in other communist countries before, and there weren't as many people who were smiling on the streets. I've been trying to find out why so many people are smiling and happy. I think it's because changes have happened over the last 5 or 10 years that have made people seem more hopeful. One thing that might be happening here with the youth is that all the changes happening, it's their future. They have something to look forward to. And I think there might be some excitement thinking that there is something to look forward to for them as far as the economy and the opening up of the country.
I understand that Vietnam is the youngest country in Asia. I think the average age here is 21. And so it's a growing country. These are all people with their lives ahead of them. And so sure, they're excited about cellular phones coming in and all these appliances and boom boxes and stereos and all the other things, computers. I've been walking down the streets here and you can pay, I think it's 10 cents to play Pac-Man for an hour in someone's living room. It's a shame that the whole world is becoming so homogenized. It's a shame that we're going to walk down the streets and see McDonald's and Burger Kings here. I think that's awful. They probably think it's wonderful. I think it's a shame that the first thing people do is they buy a motorcycle when they have the money to afford it, because the noise level, everyone's beeping and honking, the pollution, the air starting to get dirty. You know what's going to happen. It's one of those sort of irreversible trends.
You see bicycles and motorcycles and mopeds everywhere. The streets are flocked with people coming and going, and Saigon appears to be a city on the move. People move about in this city. They go places. One asks oneself, where are they going? Because it's not only rush hour traffic. It's not in the morning, it's not in the evening, it's all day long. The streets are full of movement. One of the things that struck me most was the quantity of humanity that actually lives in this city. I didn't realize there are 4 million people that live in Saigon, and I had always thought that there was no one in the world like Delhi for the intensity of population. And I felt today that the scene in this neighborhood was very much like that I'd seen in India many times. I visited District 4, which is the poorest neighborhood of Saigon. I was struck by a definite level of poverty, but I can't say that it was worse or really even close to levels of poverty that I've seen in many other large cities. People appeared to be in hardship, but yet you saw a large presence of food and vegetables and fruits, so they didn't seem hungry. People looked relatively clean. There did seem to be some form of lodging. A lot of people were living on boats, but there at least was a form of lodging.
I think something interesting is going to develop here. I think in a few seconds we're going to have a classic diving off barge shot. Nice shot.
The people in Ho Chi Minh Ville appear to be very serious in a day-to-day way. You don't see many people smiling overtly. The impression didn't indicate to me that they were in any way mean. It just seemed to me that they show a lot of concern on their face, and one might imagine that years of war and a relatively difficult economic life are reasons that this kind of impression may betray.
Something that's really unusual for me, because I travel all the time in my work, is that in this particular instance, when I came to Vietnam, and I thought about this when I arrived, I realized that I had had actually no preconceived images of what the place was going to look like. The total background for Vietnam for me was the Vietnam War. I find this place full of grace and elegance. I find the people extremely resilient, hardworking. It was my impression. I just had a sort of a general sense of decency and freshness.
The hardest thing about doing a passage to Vietnam was wondering if the government was being honest with us. When they told us they would give us access to parts of Vietnam that no Westerners had ever been to before, they've completely come through with every single thing that they promised. I was really excited today because I was invited to photograph on a military base, and I've been told that no one else has ever been allowed to photograph before on a Vietnamese military base. I'm not quite sure what the state secret was involved, why people couldn't do that before. Maybe they just don't want to be seen in that military light.
That's wonderful. The light is great. Good, thank you. Thank you very much.
I first came to Vietnam in 1966. I came here as a photographer for Life magazine, and I ended up staying 5 years and being married to a Vietnamese girl. And my last trip here was in 1975 when I came back to get my wife's family out.
Hey, son, if I had known then what I know now, this would be the closest I'd get.
It's been 19 or 20 years since I've been back to Vietnam. I've come to Quang Tri province, where I spent a lot of time during the war. It was a very mean province at that time because it was all military. They had mined everything, they had barbed wired everything, they had censored everything. 20 miles on either side of the DMZ was like a moonscape. The legacy in Quang Tri province is awful because when you get close to the DMZ, the province looks like it's been rototilled. And that is because they've been digging for scrap metal, meaning mines, bombs, whatever, for the last 20 years. They're still digging for this stuff. 2 days ago, 4 people were killed by a bomb that they had found, and they were sawing it open to get rid of the explosives and sell the scrap metal. And it exploded and it killed them. And this happens once a week, once every 2 weeks, still to this day. Quang Tri province is the poorest province in Vietnam. Average income per capita is $10 a year. It's a poor province in more ways than one. The weather is not good here. It's a very dry climate in this area, and it's very difficult to grow things year-round like you get in the rest of Vietnam. The Americans can't let go of this war. They won't let go and get on with their lives. The Vietnamese, of course, didn't have a choice, but they let go of it a long time ago. The world's only superpower, the third world country of Vietnam, inextricably entwined with each other. And it used to be a dance of death, Now it's a dance, hopefully, of economics and growth.
I have to say something. I'm really surprised on my husband, Dick Swanson. He's loved my country as much as I love my own country here. He's very emotional when every time we talk about Vietnam. We talk about Hanoi and everything like that. And I believe it or not, he tell me one thing. He said, Jermaine, if you really want to move back to Vietnam, live in Vietnam, we have a house, a place to live in, I'm ready. Anytime, you just let me know. I'm ready to go back there, live with you. Actually, I'm very proud of my husband, very proud. He's blonde hair and blue eyes, but his mentality, his heart, and he's Vietnamese like I am.
When I first came to Vietnam in '66, the first place I went to on assignment was Hue. It's the cultural center of the two Vietnams. Divides the country almost perfectly in half. Hue had a grace and an elegance to it, a pace that the rest of the country didn't have. The schools, the colleges, the poetry, the music, the students, the sculptures, the art. Hue is still a cultural center of Vietnam. The feeling of that still.
Hue poetry and music is a phenomenon in Vietnam. Maybe thanks to the nature of Hue, you know that a lot of landscape and very quiet, frequented, is something that maybe stir up your heart. Many cities in this world have very, very beautiful river, but you know that Perfume River is unforgettable for the first time, and the second time, and maybe 100 times. Especially the life along this river.
We are in Phu Hiep, the most bustling town in the Mekong Delta. You see, now they are very busy doing selling and buying everything. The farmers here bring here the agricultural products, and they get industrial products, just like soap, medicine, gasoline, and so on. The system of channels and waterways are so dense. Is the main transportation in the Mekong Delta. So they use boats and small terminals. It can be compared to Hondas and motorbikes in big cities. I'm sure every family has his boat to take their children to school, to go to the market, and to everywhere.
Having traveled the length of the river, starting in Tibet, the whole character of the river up above Cambodia is underutilization. And then you come down to the delta, you're seeing suddenly everybody utilizing this river. It's transportation, they drink the water, they bathe in it, they do everything in it.
I like to get to a place before sunrise, generally 30 minutes before. I like setting up early and watching the scene develop, which is what we did this morning. That looks like a little watermelon, let me see. Yeah, that's a little melon boat. So
he puts that up on top of the pole so that the other little boats, the suppliers, come up to him, those that have watermelons to sell. So the little boats with the watermelons gather around the big boat and they buy.
The people who live in Mekong Delta, because they had a very favorable condition, weather, good weather, and many rivers, so they earn money very easy. So they spend a lot, and they are very generous and warm-hearted. The eye factory owner is very big family. The fisherman needs eye to keep the fish fresh. He thinks making eye is good business. That is why they invest to ice making factory. In one reason, they can employ his children. And another thing, they think that's a good business for the fisherman to buy his eye to keep the fish fresh. I think he's a rich man because one day he can earn at least $40.
Mostly in the Mekong Delta, it's known for rice. It's considered as a rice basket in Vietnam. So yes, you know, we have rice surplus. Last year we export more than 6 million tons.
One of the other interesting aspects of the Delta that I wanted to photograph was this scene right here on the road where they really use the road as a staging area for everything. Here we've got a farmer drying the rice and using the, actually hoping that cars will run over the rice so that the grain will be separated from the husk.
Rice is very important to my nation. Maybe nobody can live without eating rice when we are still baby and when we grow up, and even when many people go abroad and they work in other countries, but they cannot eat bread frequently. They must eat rice. Rice in Vietnam is water rice. Rice raised in water, planted in water, and so people must harvest rice by hand. I think that beholding peasants harvesting rice is a very nice experience.
Typical Vietnamese food is rice and vegetable, fish and meat.
Vietnamese cooking is very light. We do not thickness of cornstarch. We very lightly saute and barbecue, but very well seasoning. The reason the Vietnamese cooking is so good is we combine between French influence and a Chinese influence to make the best two cuisines together to make a beautiful Vietnamese cuisine. It's very, very lean and nice.
I love the way the people look here. There's something about the diet here. There's food everywhere, vegetables, great looking food. The people are very slender here. I think they might have good diets.
I find the people here to be very handsome and very beautiful, physically attractive. They're incredibly photogenic. I think the biggest problem we're going to have in editing A Passage to Vietnam is having too many photographs. My wife, Jennifer Irwit, and I are going to strap 7,000 rolls of film to a first-class seat on Thai Airways on the way home. We will take the film to Los Angeles, where it will be developed over 4 days. The film will be driven from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and then we fly in a team of editors from Time and Life and Newsweek and the London Observer, from magazines around the world. There'll be 10 editors. All these people have votes, and when a picture is projected on the wall, everyone raises their hands, and you have to get 6 votes for the picture to stay in. And so in 7 days, we will narrow 200,000 photographs down to 1,000. It's really painful. It's like which of your children make it onto the lifeboat. I mean, it's so painful of what gets left out of these books.
3, 4, out. Oh, come on.
Okay.
The part that I find most rewarding is the edit, which is going on now. Each evening, I get to see hundreds of pictures being projected, and it's amazing to see photographs from the entire country and seen through all the different eyes of these different photographers who all have a different style and a different way of looking at things.
The thing I love about this project is that if it was shot a week earlier or a week later, this would be a completely different book. There wouldn't be a single photograph in this book that would be the same. The fragility of that, the fact that these pictures are so ephemeral and that somebody turned a corner left instead of right, and that's why that picture ended up in the book, that's what I love about it, because it really is a sense of discovery and not just repackaging something. I think that Vietnam is going to become the great adventure vacation over the course of the next few years, because it's not dangerous at all. But when I told people I was going to Vietnam, they all said, "Oh gosh, I mean, you better be careful." And I said, "About what?" And they were all saying, "Well, you know, the war." And I said, "The war was 25 years ago. It's safer anywhere in Vietnam than it is in Manhattan or most American cities." I mean, that's kind of a sad fact of life.
I fear that everything goes too fast for Vietnam. Vietnam export everything out, from rice to marble to everything to foreign countries. Then what will be left for Vietnam? I think that they should slow down and thinking twice before what they're doing to preserve more for Vietnam and for young people, for the next generations.
My dreams for Vietnam, you know, because I'm a Vietnam, and I'm really moved at my fellow man's poverty. I hope that my fellow man will get more prosperous, but understand the value of our nation too. And so I hope that my country gets more prosperous, more powerful, but still Vietnam.
We're in a very special time here. Very few photographers have come to photograph this country. So we're seeing it in its virgin state. And these people are extremely open. They haven't been spoiled by tourism. They're just, you know, it's probably one of the easiest countries in the world to photograph. There's this innocence, this openness to foreigners. It's a real joyful place to work.